No way. They met with No, they didn't meet with. Oh my God, they did meet with Yulia Tymoshenko. Oh my God. Really? I'm not even like, this doesn't even scare me. This just kind of baffles me. Because people don't want this woman to leave the country. People don't, if this is what their plan, if their plan is Yulia, if their grand plan against Zelensky is Yulia, they're gonna face plant, they're gonna crumble. Don't worry, guys. We're gonna put the pressure on Zelensky. Yulia. Okay. 4 senior members of Donald Trump's entourage have held secret discussion with some of Kiev's top political opponents to Volodymyr Zelensky, just as Washington's allies with Moscow in seeking to lever the Ukrainian president out of his job. The senior Trump allies held talks with the Ukrainian opposition leader Yulia Tymoshenko, a remorselessly ambitious former prime minister and senior member of the party of Petro Poroshenko, Zelensky's immediate predecessor as president, according to 3 Ukrainian parliamentarians and a U.S. Republican foreign policy expert. Damn. The discussion centered on whether Ukraine could hold quick presidential elections. These are being delayed in line with the country's constitution because Ukraine remains under martial law. Critics of holding elections say that they could be chaotic and play into Russian hands, with so many potential voters serving on the front lines or living abroad as refugees. This is the biggest problem. How about this? If the United States said, fine, hold an election, we will help you make sure that every refugee and displaced person gets to vote, then maybe you could do it. But that still would not stop the Russians from trying to interfere. That would still not possibly stop the Russians from trying to bomb polling places. Point is, like, an election is not as like hosting an election during a war where people have long-range missiles is not as easy as holding an election during the Civil War, as people have often made the comparison to. Cannonballs cannot go 20 miles, 30, 40, 100 miles away. The Trump aides are confident that Zelensky would lose any vote due to war fatigue and public frustration over rampant corruption. Oh my God, they're actually brain dead. They have no clue what they're doing. This is their plan. Their plan is to just like, if we can force them to have an election, then we'll get someone who will cuck out to us in the next presidency. This is never going to work. Now, okay, let's for a moment say that this progressed, that it is found that a Ukrainian politician worked with the president of the United States who just cut off aid to Ukraine to force an election to put more pressure on the Ukrainian government. How are the Ukrainian results going to be? Yes, let's put more pressure on our government, undermine ourselves. Are you stupid? Ukraine is ahead, and Zelensky's ahead in every poll. He polls positively. He polls better than Trump, polls better than Biden, polls better than Harris, polls better than Keir Starmer, Macron, Merz, everyone. He polls with like between 57 to 63%, which is not as high as the 75 to 80% at the start of the war, but Zelensky is still widely popular. And the thing is, an approval rating doesn't even necessarily equal, I think somebody else should be president. Because you could not like Zelensky, and I know people who don't like Zelensky, and I asked them, should somebody else take their place? They're like, nope, after the war. After the war, we'll put somebody else in there. Somebody who cares more about labor rights, somebody who cares more about whatever their issues are, right? So I don't see the building up. If this is a strategy, if this is what Trump does to both fulfill the Russian demand of having an election during the war and add pressure to the Ukrainian government, he is going to just continue to rub the face of the Ukrainians in the mess that he has created with them diplomatically. It's only going to continue to hurt our relationship, and I don't think it's going to hurt Zelensky. I don't think another country coming in and forcing them to have elections because they're going to make the people rise up again. He's deluded. None of them know what Ukrainians want. They're completely lost touch with reality. They've completely lost touch with reality. You want to know what's the funniest thing? If Zelensky was to lose, you know what the type of person he would lose to? Zaluzhnyi, who is also somebody who would want security guarantees, and is also somebody who's already like posted pictures with Zelensky post-Trump attack to indicate that he stands with him. I mean, this is disconnected. Indeed, his poll ratings have been in decline, although they've picked up in the wake of last week's Oval Office brawl when the Ukrainian leader was shown the door after being berated by President Donald J. Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. The most recent poll shows Zelensky still comfortably ahead in the race for the presidency. So this is another thing I want to throw out there. Zelensky's approval, and I'm going to take a swing from the hip and just say that I think this is 99.9% true, is going to increase because of Trump's attacks on him. There are people who don't like what's happening between Zelensky and Trump, and there are even some Ukrainians who think that Zelensky maybe should have sucked up harder, right? Where there's like, look, it's a war, it is what it is. If you have to get up there and beg, you got to get up there and beg. It is what it is. But the majority of Ukrainians, from who I've messaged, from who I've talked to, think that now is the time where they have to support Zelensky. Because right now is when he's being put under pressure, when his country is trying to be bled dry, where foreign powers are trying to buy half their natural resources just to settle debts that they didn't even know they were given. And so it's a rally around the flag moment. And you see this sometimes with sanctions. You see this sometimes with other countries coming in and trying to dictate to the people of another land what they must do. The people rally around the flag against that opposition. And right now, I think that rally around the flag moment, they're concentrating it around Zelensky. If you want to hurt Zelensky, you want to genuinely hurt Zelensky, you know what you do? You don't attack him and demand he holds an election. You would do things like, I'm going to reveal corruption scandals that Zelensky's had during the war. I'm going to reveal this. I'm going to reveal that. That's the type of stuff you would do to undermine support to the point that they think that only somebody else could lead them through the war. And if Trump had that, I'm sure he would release it. He just doesn't have it. He just doesn't have it. And so this is the next thing they think they can do. The official line from the U.S. administration is that Trump is not interfering in Ukraine's domestic politics. This week, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick denied his boss was weighing into Ukrainian politics, adding that Trump just wants is a partner for peace. By the way, look at Elon Musk, and he's telling like people all around the world, if you're in Germany, vote for AfD. If you're here, vote for them. If you're there, vote for them. Destroy the liberals, you know? So, I mean, maybe Trump's not going to directly weigh in, even though he's kind of already has. People around him certainly are. But the behavior of Trump and his officials suggests quite the opposite. Trump has accused Zelensky of being a dictator without elections, while Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard have falsely accused Kiev of canceling the election. But while the Trump camp may hope an election will sink Zelensky, he is still massively more popular than Tymoshenko and Poroshenko. And this is the thing. Look, I'm not saying Zelensky doesn't have flaws. Go check the Panama Papers, right? You can go and look at his position on unions, which I think is not as strong as it's weaker than I would want. There's issues with corruption, people around him that people don't trust. People might not even like hate Zelensky, but they hate his advisors. They hate the people they hate certain people who are whispering in his ear, right? These are all real problems that she has, right? I mean, I'm talking about Zelensky. He's transitioned, sorry. The true woke movement. Okay. But these are all problems Zelensky has. Nobody that they're offering to run against him beats him out in popularity or doesn't have problems or would clearly beat him. So anybody speaking with confidence that Zelensky would lose an election is just completely deluded. You've bought your own bubble. You've bought your own bullshit. And the propaganda and ideological spew from the mouth of the White House is now becoming an internal logic. A senseless eternal logic, but an eternal logic nonetheless. These are not going to be the people that beat Zelensky, okay? In a poll conducted by the British pollster Survation this week after the blow up at the White House, 44% say would back Zelensky for the presidency. That's on top of his like 60-something% approval rating. His nearest rival, trailing him by more than 20 points, is Valery Zaluzhnyi. Now, let me be clear. Valery Zaluzhnyi is the only person I currently think has a real substantive chance of beating Zelensky in an election. And he's down 20 fucking points. He has an approval rating of like 78 to 80% because he's what? A war hero. Not some, I don't know, some pacifistic businessman who just wants to concede on everything, but a war hero who held off the Russians at the start of the war. And he's down 20 points still. Now, if he announced he was going to run, maybe that would change the dynamic. Maybe more people would back him. If he expressed vocal disagreements with how the defense of Bakhmut was handled, or say Syrskyi should not have been given, then maybe the dynamics would change. Maybe Valery Zaluzhnyi, and this is me being serious, maybe he could win. Maybe he could. But Zaluzhnyi has given zero indication that he's going to run for public office. He is currently the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Kingdom, and he recently released a picture of him shaking Zelensky's hand, which most political observers in Ukraine have taken to mean that he supports Zelensky while under pressure right now because it's what's necessary for the country. And he's the person who's down 20 points, let alone before they got to the people they actually met with, who are down even further. Let me read this. Only 10% backed Poroshenko. 10%. Who is known as the Chocolate King due to his confectionery empire. Now, here's the person they met with. Tymoshenko, a former prime minister, garnered just 5.7%. 5.7% versus Zelensky's 44%, with a much higher approval rating. And let's be clear, Tymoshenko is not like, oh, she's the anti-establishment, anti-corruption crusader. She's from Poroshenko's party. Poroshenko's party was pretty corrupt. I remember hearing stories from those who knew Poroshenko about about the corruption and how blatant it was. And so she's not going to be able to advertise herself as an anti-corruption crusader. Plus, she's been prime minister before. It's not like she can say, I'm the outsider who's come in and I'm going to buck the status quo. She can't advertise that. They don't like Zelensky. They wish Zelensky was gone because they want somebody else in there to make decisions that are more favorable to Washington, right? Now, putting aside the fact that switching out Zelensky isn't necessarily going to make Zaluzhnyi or Tymoshenko necessarily make decisions that are favorable to Washington, like putting that aside, this woman was, they have no clue. They don't know who this woman is. They don't know what her agenda is. They don't know what she believes in. They don't know anything about her. All they know is that she's not Zelensky. She's from a party that is in opposition to Zelensky, and she's a known opposition figure. I mean, I don't know. This is like going into American politics and being like, oh, I don't like that Trump fella. Let's run, who's in the opposition? Oh, Nancy Pelosi. Run her for president. That's the equivalent of what what's being done right now. You have no idea if they're popular. You have no idea if they could win. There's other people that almost certainly poll better and actually might have a chance. And instead, you decide Nancy Pelosi should run for president. More like Jill Stein. No, it's not like Jill Stein because Tymoshenko actually held an office of some significance and she is in a party that actually holds seats in the Rada. So I wouldn't say it's exactly Jill Stein. Now, if they start saying that Arestovich is going to be the next president of Ukraine, that's when I will die. The key to all of the plans under discussion via back channels is to hold presidential elections after a temporary ceasefire is agreed, but before full-scale peace negotiations get underway in earnest. The idea of an early presidential election is also being pushed by the Kremlin. You want to know why? Because Zelensky is strongly in favor of getting as much land as back possible. He doesn't make these concessions, and the Kremlin wants somebody who would be weaker, which has wanted to be rid of Zelensky's for years. Now, let's say if this was to play out, what this would mean is ceasefire, guns have stopped firing, election, Ukraine elects somebody else, and that new person then negotiates the peace deal. The reason Trump would want this is because Zelensky is not conceding to their and Washington and Russia's demands. Now that Washington is negotiating on behalf of the Russians, he's not willing to make those concessions to come to peace with the Russians immediately, which is what Trump wants. He wants to wave around the piece of paper, be able to say, I'm the peacemaker, give me the Nobel Peace Prize, start normalization with the Russians. And Zelensky's a barrier to that. And so for all the talk of not interfering in Ukraine's domestic politics, for all the grandstanding from Trump supporters about, oh, we don't need to interfere in Ukrainian domestic affairs. Oh, you know, proxy Ukraine. Ukraine's our proxy. It's our proxy. Then once Ukraine shows it not to be our proxy, to have their own interests, to fight for their own people, for their own land, then you want to make them your proxy. Then you get fucking frustrated, you get angry, every accusation was a confession, and you want Ukraine to be your proxy. You want them to walk and follow you around like a dog and determine the fate of their people without their people's input. That's what you want. You wanted to be Victoria Nuland the whole time. The whole time the MAGA movement wanted to be Victoria Nuland. They just didn't realize it. They're just repressed. They're in the closet about it. They're a closet Victoria Nuland. They wanted to be the idea of Victoria Nuland in their head. The boogeyman that they had made, boogie woman. They want to be that. Both Tymoshenko and Poroshenko have publicly opposed holding elections before the fighting ends. as has Kiev's mayor Vitaly Klitschko. Nonetheless, Poroshenko's people and Yulia, they're all talking the Trump world, positioning themselves as people who would be easier to work with and people who would consent to many of the things that Zelensky is not agreeing to. A top Republican foreign policy expert told Politico, asking that his name be withheld so he could speak more freely. That is interesting to think about. What are they willing to concede for power? What is Klitschko and Tymoshenko willing to concede to the Russians in order to get power in Ukraine? And now that it has been openly reported by Politico, this is going to get over to the Ukrainians. They're in survival mode. There's no way this news isn't going to make its way down the pipeline. How are Ukrainians going to react to Tymoshenko with a 5.7%, rate compared to, Zelensky's 44 in an upcoming election? How are they going to react to it? Are they going to say, you know what, that sounds good. Can we get somebody that would concede more to Trump and the Russians? Or does this rally around the flag effect indicate that they want somebody who can hold out stronger for a better deal, that they want peace, but not on Russia's terms? Asked whether Tymoshenko had been involved in talks with members of the U.S. administration or Trump about a presidential election or peace negotiations, her spokesperson thanked for Politico for its interest. We won't comment on that yet, she said. So they have. They have been talking. They have 100% been talking. They just don't want to say it. Politico has also contacted Poroshenko's European Solidarity Party to ask about whether talks with Trump officials to discuss election. The press office responded, "Our narrative is not to push for elections, but to secure free and fair competitive post-war elections in our country. It is also logical that any contacts do not include the presentation of the vision of President Poroshenko and the European solidarity on the way to end the war with a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace on the limits for possible compromise on the negotiating points." Politico has reached out to the 4 members of Trump's entourage mentioned as being involved in the discussion, but received no immediate reply. My goodness. They wanted a proxy the whole time. They wanted a proxy the whole time. All those people that talked about, oh my God, the Euromaidan coup, Victoria Nuland chose the leadership. They overthrew this. They're our proxy. They just do what we say because they're ours. We're just putting them in the grinder for empire. Immediately, once the Ukrainians look at your big daddy dictator and say, how about we have something on Ukrainian terms? How about we talk about the future of Ukraine with Ukraine at the negotiating table? And all of a sudden, never mind, we want them to be a proxy. Never mind, we want them to be our puppet. Never mind, we want them to be subservient to American interests. Never mind, we want them to listen to us before they listen to their own people. They are everything they have accused the establishment of being. They never wanted to remove the decrepit corruption, or they never wanted to remove the lies or the deceit or the imperial nature that America has developed with certain nations over the years. They simply want to take it over, expand it, and make it Trumpified. It's not the elimination or the draining of the swamp. It's certainly the expansion and Trumpification of the swamp. My God, man. That's crazy.